As you probably are already aware, Mozilla, the makers of Firefox, they derive the majority of their income from Google. Google default search engine placement in Firefox accounts for over 80% of the income that Mozilla receives. Over 80%. Can you imagine? It's wild. It's wild that you would run a business that way. Well, thanks to the lawsuit of the United States v. Google, which Google has already lost and is firmly in the punishment phase, we have just learned this week, thanks to the proposed final judgment filed by the plaintiffs, that it is an almost virtual certainty that Firefox has only, at most, 9 months left of that sweet, sweet income from Google, which means that within the next year, possibly sooner than 9 months from now, Mozilla is going to need to lay off 80% or more of their staff in order to survive, or miraculously find a huge pile of money that they've been unable to find up until now, and they've been trying really hard. Now, this is all coming out of the United States v. Google lawsuit, the proposed final judgment. It was filed on the 20th of November, which is just a little less than 2 days, about a day and a half ago. And within that proposed final judgment, there includes a number of remedies that they are proposing the judge impose upon Google. And they are intense and sweeping. They're talking about that Google will have to divest, meaning sell off Chrome. The Chrome web browser entirely would no longer be able to be part of Google, right? It would have to be sold off to a competitor, essentially. Also, they're talking about selling off Android. That's right. They literally are talking about selling off the entire Android operating system division to another company. Now, that one is a little less certain because the plaintiffs, the United States, the state of Colorado, and the like, they have proposed multiple options for how to handle Android. And one of them is just sell Android off entirely. One of the alternative options is a series of what they say are behavioral remedies, meaning restrictions on what Google can do related to Android. And they are sweeping and vast and would completely change Google's entire business, like completely and utterly. Like they would not be able to tie a lot of their marketing stuff into Android anymore, which would remove 90+% of Google's sources of revenues from Android. So what's going to happen with that remains to be seen. So the timeline for all of this is as follows. So the 20th of this month, we got the plaintiff's proposed final judgment. That's what we're talking about right here today. Being as the bulk of this proposed final judgment appears to be roughly in line with the judgment against Google by the judge in this case, it seems unlikely that the judge is going to rule in a way that is very far deviating from what we're seeing in front of us. But Google technically has until December 20th, so a little less than a month from now, to counter this. They have to come up with their own proposal for how to fix what would the cause of their lawsuit, right? Because they already lost the lawsuit. They're not defending themselves at this point. They have to propose to the judge a convincing argument for how to fix their monopoly practices in a way that the judge would feel satisfied. That is not selling off Chrome, that is not selling off Android and the like. That's going to be a pretty tall order. I'm very much looking forward to reading Google's counteroffer because I have no idea what they're going to offer that has any chance in heck of getting accepted by this judge. Then on March 7th of 2025, so this coming March, the plaintiffs in the case will have to file what they call their actual final judgment, right? Because what we have right now is the proposed final judgment, and then Google counters it, and then the plaintiffs come in and counter that with a revised final judgment. So basically this document, but countering or saying why whatever Google came up with is garbage, right? That's the strategy going forward. That's the timeline. Then the actual ruling happens in August of this coming summer. So roughly 9 months from now, Judge Mata will be ruling on it and implementing whatever the proposed remedies are. That's the timeline, which means realistically, that's how much runway that Mozilla has. I mean, they earn 80% or more of their revenue or of their income from this Google search engine placement. And they're saying flat out that that is one of the things that must be eliminated because of this court case. There's not another option for that one, right? Like for the Android thing, they give a couple of options. And while one of the options, selling off Android, seems far more likely to be accepted than the behavioral remedy option, the remedy of Google no longer being allowed to pay companies for default search engine placement no longer appears to be an option. Like there's no alternative to that. So that's like about as certain as you can get at this point that is going to happen. Now, what's crazy about this is going to have a massive shakeup throughout the industry. This isn't just, changing how Google does business. This means that 9 months from now, give or take, a few weeks in either direction, whatever, but about 9 months from now, Mozilla will no longer have their revenue, which means unless someone swoops in and replaces that revenue, which they've been unable to do, I'm going to walk you through that momentarily, there is almost certainty that Mozilla is going to be laying off 80% of their staff, which is going to have a massive change in how they do business. It also means that Google will no longer have that default paid search engine placement, which they use with Firefox, across Apple services, including in Apple Safari and all over the place, which opens up the opportunity for significant competition in both the search engine space and the web browser space, especially with Google having to sell off Chrome entirely, which means that whoever now owns Chrome is going to need to find a way to fund Chrome, which means that the entire business strategy and revenue generation strategy around Chrome is going to have to change fundamentally, because right now it is entirely around marketing and advertising, brokering inside of the search engine. That's generally how they make Chrome make money. That's not really going to be an option anymore. Things are going to change dramatically. So the entire web browser space and the search engine space is going to be tilted on its head in 2025. I mean, over the next 9 months, we're going to see some massive shifts. Now, I've been looking at this for a while now. We've been following along. If you listen to, watch, or read the Lunduke Journal, this should not be terribly surprising. Google's finances are bizarre. We've been following this particular case and how this case could essentially make Mozilla go away. I mean, this could bankrupt Mozilla, both the corporation and the foundation. So it's not terribly surprising that this is happening. Just to put some of the numbers in your head so you can see what we're talking about here. In 2022, Mozilla brought in total revenue of around $593 million, right? $500 million. A lot of you are going, excuse me, bacon powder. They brought in $500 million from Firefox. Yeah, they did. They bring in a ton of money. They're a mega corporation. A lot of people don't really realize how mega Mozilla is. They are a massive, massive corporation. Now, of that, just shy of $600 million in revenue, over $500 million of that came from royalties. Now, what are those royalties? Well, those royalties are almost entirely Google search engine default placement. That's what that is. That's when they flag royalties in that's what they're referring to. If there's anything else in there, it's breadcrumbs, right? It's all Google search engine placement. Mozilla has been planning for this. They know where their weakness is, right? For whatever complaints me, you, and many of us have about Mozilla and Firefox, how they've handled things, what they've done regarding their pro-censorship and crazy stances, the reality is they knew that their income was tenuous, that it was hanging by a thread, and if something went wrong with Google's paid search engine placement in Firefox, that Mozilla was up a creek without a paddle. They've known this for some time, which is why Mozilla has been changing so dramatically, right? They seem to feel that their future has nothing to do with Firefox. Now, if you watch their planned strategy and their forward-looking statements, you start to realize that maybe they are planning for a future where Mozilla has no control over Firefox and nothing to do with Firefox. For example, they released, was about a year and a half ago, a 25-year roadmap for Mozilla, where they don't once say Firefox, the web browser, or web browsing in general, is part of their 25-year roadmap. Their 25-year roadmap revolves around advertising and artificial intelligence paid services, right? And then we've seen over the course of this year, especially starting this summer, Firefox has begun to incorporate significant amounts of user tracking technology into Firefox. Mozilla purchased an advertisement brokering company. So Mozilla is now an advertisement brokering company. That's what their business is now, outside of this one Google search engine placement strategy they've got. And they've really kind of pushed down that road. So it's AI and advertising and AI. That's their future. And they seem really hell-bent on going down that road. I've been reporting on this for a while, and Lunduke Journal audience, you all know that this is happening. What's amazing to me is that this is going to catch a lot of people off guard. Because we've seen this coming. We've looked at the numbers. When you look at Mozilla's IRS records, their annual reports, how they do business, and you just analyze their statements, you come to the conclusion that Mozilla is planning for a post-Firefox future very, very soon. In fact, they are so all in on advertising that currently both Firefox and Thunderbird, the two primary pieces of software that Mozilla makes, they currently are focused on telemetry and user data collection by default, and they are in violation of European law to do it. They feel that their future is so dependent on collecting web browser user data and selling it to advertising companies that their very existence is reliant on them being able to do that they're completely violating European law in order to do it, and they don't care. They're just like, we need to do this. It doesn't matter what the lawsuits are. They must do this. That's how they're going forward. Now, all of this has caused a great deal of turmoil within Mozilla. We saw back in June of this year, we learned about essentially a coup that happened inside Mozilla Corporation, where the person who was being groomed to be the new CEO got cancer, right? So he was out getting treatment for cancer. He was on leave. As he was, cured, as the cancer was in remission, or whatever it was that was happening with him, he was coming back to work, right? So that was the long and short of it. He was coming back to work, and the board of directors of Mozilla learned that the CEO to be was coming back to work. So what did the board of directors do? They moved fast. They started chopping axes all over the place. They kicked out the current CEO before she could appoint her successor, which was going to happen almost immediately. Instilled a brand new CEO, an interim CEO from the board of directors. And that new interim CEO was laser focused on the post-Firefox future for Mozilla. advertising and AI going forward, right? It was, and it's crazy. There's lawsuits happening around this. I chronicled the whole thing because when you read through it, I've said this before, but it reads like a Game of Thrones power struggle. It's brutal and cruel and mean and just crazy. Like it's a frenzied power struggle. And when you read through it, you get the real impression that there is a sense of impending doom inside Mozilla, that they are in need of taking drastic action. They're backed into a corner and they're just lashing out like crazy because they need to do something to survive, because they're just not likely to survive much longer. And if you just need a little bit more proof that they have no interest in that's a good picture I have. Sorry, for those of you listening to the audio version, I've got a picture up of myself right now, and it's fantastic. It's making me laugh. And apparently I'm wearing the same shirt. Oh, yeah, look at that. I'm wearing the same shirt. Mozilla put out a survey. This was last week. They put out a survey where they said, what's your dream future for Mozilla? Right? If you could picture Mozilla doing anything in the world, what would it be? And they had a bunch of different choices. And you know what was not among those choices anywhere? Firefox or web browsing. But Firefox isn't on there. Their whole reason for existing, the Mozilla rendering engine and Firefox, the whole reason that the organization was created in the first place, and the only way that they've been able to generate revenue since then, is not even on the list, right? It's all about AI and 8 different options for what your gender might be, and like just crazy stuff that has nothing to do with them making money, right? And so you have to wonder, as you're reading through all of this and you're seeing what actions that Mozilla is taking, you have to wonder really who's in charge, because it feels like a basket filled with wild cats, and they're all just going nuts in there and just acting out like crazy. And there's no really one person in charge. Yes, they have a CEO, and yes, they have a board of directors, but it's just wild, frantic actions. And the one thing that all those rabid basket of cats all agree on is that they don't want to make a web browser. And they don't know how they're going to generate revenue. Like, they put forward all these options. You know, we're going to do some advertising over here, and we're going to collect user data and sell it over here. And we're going to censor people using artificial intelligence services over here. Like, it's crazy stuff. It's stuff that people who like Firefox for being a privacy respecting open source browser would hate, right? So at this point, there's really not much of a reason to use Firefox if you were an old school Firefox fan, right? It's quickly moving towards not as open source, not privacy respecting, right? And just crazy, and just a giant basket of rabid cat crazy. Now, what's really fascinating about this is Mozilla obviously knows what's happening. They know what's up. They know the writing's on the wall. They know that they're going to lose their money. They just laid off the foundation arm of Mozilla, because there's the foundation and the corporation. One owns the other, and they're essentially the same thing, but they are technically kind of a little bit different. But the foundation side laid off 30% of their staff just a couple weeks ago. And then immediately threw a giant party at a luxury resort in Africa. Flew a bunch of people to Africa, spent a ton of money doing this in order to promote, and I'm not kidding about this, the future of Mozilla, which was, I'm quoting here, feminist, decolonial, LGBTQIA plus climate justice using artificial intelligence. That's exactly what they view as the future of Mozilla. Now, how does any of that result in revenue? I'm not here to poo-poo on those particular ideas. You like those ideas, you don't like that ideas, it's almost irrelevant right now. If you've got a business and 80% of your revenue has a ticking time bomb on it, right? Next August, that revenue goes away. And you got to find something else. This is what you spend your money on? Your last bit of petty cash you spend on a luxury resort in Africa to promote climate justice using artificial intelligence combined with feminism, decolonialism, and LGBTQIA. Like what? They literally had entire sessions at this conference that they held, this party conference that was promoting Marxism and anti-capitalism. They're a $500 million corporation promoting anti-capitalism and Marxism. Again, $500 million for-profit corporation. I don't. It's hard to not laugh because of the insanity of it all. It truly is. I have no idea what they think they're going to do after, like, come next September, and they don't have the money left. What are they going to do? What do they think right now they're going to do? Clearly, someone within the organization understands that they're going to be doing mass layoffs. They're going to be, between now and then, they're going to have to lay off, I don't know, 80%, maybe a little more, maybe a little less, depending on how they cut things. But they're going to have to do some mass layoffs. Now, there are other potential routes that they could go down here. In theory, they could find someone. I have to change it away from this picture because it's just make me laugh too much. They're going to find someone they can who will replace that revenue stream, right? So what if they kept that same default search engine placement business in place and simply went to Microsoft and convinced them somehow to pay for Bing to be the default search engine on Firefox? Now, the problems with that are multiple. There's multiple issues there. One, Firefox it has a continuously nosediving market share. The value of Firefox is going down almost daily. Google had an interest in propping up Firefox because it staved off monopoly and anti-competition lawsuits a little bit, right? Because they propped up a competitor, right? And so Google had an incentive to pay a little bit more than maybe Firefox was actually worth in order to keep them rocking and rolling. Microsoft really doesn't have that right now. At this point in time, Microsoft doesn't have an Internet Explorer monopoly here going on, right? They've got Edge. Come on. No one's using Edge. Now it's entirely feasible that Microsoft buys Chrome. That'd be funny. I digress. So, but the odds of Microsoft coming in and using Bing as the default search engine inside Firefox and paying Mozilla a similar amount to they're currently earning with Google is really, really low. The odds of that happening are just incredibly, incredibly low. It's just not as valuable as they think it would be. So they're going to have to do something, and they're going to have to do something drastic. And there's not Yahoo, right? Yahoo search is not really a thing that people think about anymore. There was a time when Yahoo gave money to Mozilla for the exact same thing that Google does now. Again, it's just not a viable option at this point. And you can see the desperation in the words and actions from Mozilla. They know they don't have that viable option sitting there. So they're throwing everything out there, seeing what sticks. They've got like 10 different little AI companies that they've spun up right now. They have AI companies for building websites and AI companies for censoring Republicans because they hate Republicans. They have AI things going all over the place, right? Nothing's generating revenue. Nothing. None of their options out there are generating enough revenue to keep the company afloat. So they're in a world of hurt. Whatever you or I think of governments interfering with corporations like this, right? And I think for many people, this dredges up a pile of mixed feelings, right? Because is Google, are they anti-competitive? Well, yes, they are. Do I want governments coming in and telling software companies what they can and can't do? Not really, no. Is Mozilla kind of a shady organization that does really weird stuff with their money? Yeah, yeah, they are. Are they pro censorship, anti personal information privacy? Yeah, they are all that now. They're kind of a garbage company. But on the other hand, do I want to see one of the more viable alternative web rendering engines go out of business? No, no, I don't want to see that. So again, it's just a big pile of mixed feelings. But regardless of what my feelings are or your feelings are, I think we have to recognize that change is afoot. No matter what we feel about this, come next summer, next August, Mozilla is going to be in a position where they are fundamentally irrelevant, right? Maybe they have to sell off Firefox in order to continue their political advocacy arm. I don't know. I don't know what they do, but they're essentially dead. Right, that's happening whether we like it or not. Chrome is not going to be Google anymore. That's happening, right? Whether we like it or not, the odds of that happening are like 99% at this point. That's happening. That's a virtual certainty. That's going to change things fundamentally. Now, which means that the search engine market and the web browser market are going to be upended. Who ends up on top after all that is going to be a really interesting thing to watch. Realistically, when you look at trends in software, whether it be web browsers, Linux distributions, etc., the top dog in a category can go from top dog with 80+% market share to down to 15% market share in a year and a half. It's happened repeatedly. When you look at like the Linux distribution space, you see scenarios where, for example, Red Hat was the king of Linux, of desktop consumer Linux, and they were supplanted by Ubuntu in terms of user share over the course of less than 2 years. It went from Ubuntu didn't exist to Ubuntu had like 60% market share, something like that. It's crazy. Like, out of nowhere. So these sorts of shakeups in the market, and we saw similar things with web browsers already when we look at Netscape and Internet Explorer and Firefox and Chrome and it's a giant crazy roller coaster. So it's not unreasonable to think we're going to have a massive shakeup. And this particular shakeup is more extreme than anything we've seen to date. When we talk about the monopoly and anti-competitive lawsuits against Microsoft relating to Internet Explorer bundling and tying in Windows, that was a big event. And it was a big event that prompted a dramatic change in the market. I mean, Internet Explorer was way up there, right? And look at Internet Explorer now. It's not exactly a popular web browser. It's dead. And the changes happened quickly. But that lawsuit was viewed as a massive earthquake of an event within the web browser and even somewhat in the operating system industries. This lawsuit is several orders of magnitude more destructive. Whether you like the destruction or don't like the destruction, it's going to shake things up dramatically. This is a massive earthquake. It's going to shake up the search engine business. It's going to shake up the web browser business and possibly several other businesses tied to those. And when I look at it, I would not be at all surprised, and this will require a great deal of analysis and whatnot going forward, but I would not be at all surprised if we see over the next 2 years, because of what's happening this next summer, the web browser space fundamentally looking nothing like it does right now. Where if we saw that Chrome was a little 10% market share browser owned by an investment firm out of Chicago, right? Like, that would not surprise me. It would not surprise me if we saw things like Brave or some upstart browsers, like Ladybird and others claiming a top spot. It's entirely possible also that we don't have a singular top browser, that we just have, here's, Brave over here at 30% and Ladybird over here at 25% and that sort of thing. And I don't know that that would necessarily be a bad thing. But regardless of how it all shakes out, one thing is crystal clear. The change is going to be dramatic. And there's going to be a lot of articles and podcasts and YouTubers talking about how they didn't see this coming. And can you believe what's happening? When it was kind of obvious this is the way it was going all along for people who read the Lunduke Journal. Again, thank you to all of the subscribers of the Lunduke Journal for making this sort of coverage possible. Thank you for being awesome. Thank you for being the best nerds on planet Earth. Go to lunduke.com. All the links there, podcast feeds and articles and videos and different ways. You can watch the Lunduke Journal on X. You can watch the Lunduke Journal on Rumble. You can watch the Lunduke Journal on YouTube. Or on Locals is great because there's no ads over on Locals. Wherever you want to watch it is great. It's fantastic. And there's so many different ways to grab the audio podcast, which all of you already know. But thank you everyone for making that possible. And thank you for making it possible for me to do this without taking any money from Mozilla or Google or Microsoft or any of the other companies involved in any of this, because then I can actually report on it honestly without any sort of influence from any big tech company. Not a lot of outlets get to say that. I'm rather lucky in that regard. And that's thanks to all of you. I really could not do this without all of you. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, nerds and nerdettes across this whole gosh darn wacky intertubes of ours, I do declare end broadcast.